There are two great cliches about the university. One maintains it is a radical institution, when in fact it is most conservative in its institutional conduct. The other holds that it is autonomous, a cloister, when the historical fact is that it has always responded, but seldom so quickly as today, to the desires and demands of external groups, sometimes for love, sometimes for gain, increasingly willingly, and in some cases too eagerly. The external view is that the university is radical. The internal reality is that it is conservative. The internal illusion is that it is a law unto itself. The external reality is that it is governed by history. I should now like to turn to some of the changes which will be coming in American universities, are coming now in American universities, under the heading, The New Faces of Change. The universities are currently facing three great areas of related adjustments: growth, shifting academic emphases, and involvement in the life of society. The direction of adjustment in each of these areas is reasonably clear. The detailed arrangements and the timing are not. On growth, I should just like to note this, that really vast numbers of new students are coming our way. By the end of this decade, there will be 3 million more college and university students than at the start of the decade. Now, the private universities are largely isolating themselves from this mob which is approaching us. And in the process of isolating themselves from this mob of students, they are putting more pressure on the public universities to grow faster, to absorb them, and making their problems more intense than they otherwise would be. Second, on the subject of shifting academic emphases, I should only like to note as illustrations two of the very great changes, I think, that are coming in the academic world. One of them is the new biology. I think from some point in the future when we look back, it may be possible to say that if the first half of the 20th century belonged to the physical sciences, with the splitting of the atom and all the rest, that the second half of the 20th century is going to belong to the biological sciences instead. And I would even suggest that when the code of life is fully understood and can be manipulated, that the consequences for society are going to be far graver, far more serious than the splitting of the atom. That will seem almost as child's play. Another thing which I think is happening in the intellectual world is that the creative arts are going to be brought within the university. They've existed on the periphery. They're going to be naturalized as never before. And they may become the ugly ducklings of American university life, soon to become beautiful swans. At least I should hope so. And as we have these changes illustrated by the role of the creative arts in biology, as I mentioned last evening, we're going to have to be sure that we do not have any static concept of balance, that balance has to be changed all the time. And it's partly out of the imbalances that you get your progress and your adaptation. On involvement in the life of society, I should merely like to note that through television, it is now possible for the university to extend itself into almost every home in the nation. To note also that the phrase lifelong learning is becoming a reality. We turn students into alumni, and then we have to turn alumni back into students again. In law, in medicine, in engineering, business administration, and other fields. And the lifelong learning is going to become a very real aspect of the work of the major universities. I think also in terms of service to the public, that the universities are going to come to be some of the great cultural centers of the nation. As downtown areas decay or become less important, as people are more interested in culture with a higher level of education and more leisure, the universities will become great cultural centers. They have a ready-made audience, they have facilities available, people tend to cluster around them interested in intellectual and cultural affairs, and I would expect as we plan our universities for the future, we should plan this new dimension of service, the making available to the public a rich cultural life. Also, as the life of the nation becomes more complex, demanding more skilled advisors, the professors will be going not alone to Washington, D.C., but increasingly to the state capitals and the city halls as well. However all this turns out, these adjustments to growth, to new academic emphases, to the demands of society, the scene of American higher education will continue to be marked by great variety, and this is one of its great strengths. The large and the small, the private and the public, the general and the specialized all add their share to overall excellence. The total system is extraordinarily flexible, decentralized, competitive, and productive. The new can be tried, the old tested with considerable skill and alacrity. Pluralism in higher education matches the pluralistic American society. The multiversity in particular is the child of middle-class pluralism. It relates to so much of the variety of the surrounding society and is so varied internally. The overall test of higher education is not how much is done poorly, and some is, but rather how much is done superbly, and a great deal is, to the nation's great benefit. Although it has been said that the best universities in America have been caught in a stalemate of success, I think there is no stalemate, and there is some success. I should now like to turn to some changes which I think will come in the future which are not so clear. There has been some success, but there are some problems still to be faced in full, and they are problems of some consequence. One is the revival of undergraduate teaching in the university. Will require the solution of many sub-problems. How to give credit for teaching as for research. How to create a curriculum that serves the student more than the teacher. How to prepare the generalist as well as the specialist in an age of specialization looking for better generalizations. How to treat the individual student as a single unique human being in the mass student body. How to make the university seem smaller even as it grows larger. How to establish a broader range of contact between faculty and student than across the lectern or through the television screen alone. How to raise educational policy again to the forefront of faculty concerns. Increasingly also, the undergraduate in the better institutions will need to be treated as the pre-graduate student. Another major task is to create a more unified intellectual world, to make contact between the two, the three, the many cultures, to open channels of intelligent conversation across the disciplines and divisions, to close the gap between Snow's Luddites and scientists, to answer fragmentation with general theories and sensitivities. Even philosophy, which once was the center of the intellectual universe, is now itself fragmented into such diverse specialties as mathematics and semantics. However, the physical sciences are drawing together as new discoveries create more basic general theories. The biological sciences may be pulled together in the process now going on. The social sciences might be unified around the study of organizations and the relations of individuals to and within them. Chemistry and social psychology, if I were to make a guess, may come to be the central focalizing fields. As knowledge is drawn together, if in fact it is, a faculty may again be a community of masters. But a sense of the unity of all knowledge, as so many people now devoutly wish, is, I think, still a very, very long way off. The third problem is to relate administration more directly to individual faculty and students in the massive institution, to decentralize below the campus level to the operating agencies, to make the collective faculty a more vital dynamic force, as it is now only at the departmental level, to bridge the growing chasm between the department that does the teaching and the institute that does the research, with a faculty member torn between, to make the old departments and divisions more compatible with the new divisions of knowledge, to make it possible for an institution to see itself in totality rather than just piecemeal and in the sweep of history rather than just at a moment of time, to bring an understanding of both internal and external realities to all those intimately related to the process so that there may be greater understanding, to see to it that administration serves and stimulates rather than rules of the institution, that it be expendable when necessary and flexible all the time, to assure that the university can do better what it does best. In other words, to solve the whole range of governmental problems within the university. Additionally, there is the urgent issue of how to preserve a margin for excellence in a populous society, when more and more of the money is being spent on behalf of all of the people. The great university is of necessity elitist, the elite of merit, but it operates in an environment dedicated to an egalitarian philosophy. How may the contribution of the elite be made clear to the egalitarians? How may an aristocracy of intellect justify itself to a democracy of the common man? It was equality of opportunity, not equality per se, that animated the founding fathers and the progress of the American system. But the forces of populist equality have never been silent. The battle between Jeffersonianism and Jacksonianism never finally settled. Now, if there are to be new departures in response to some of the questions I'm raising, they are most likely to come on the campuses of those old private universities which have prided themselves on control of their own destiny, and on the totally new campuses of the state universities in America and the new public universities in Britain. The university for the 21st century is more likely to emerge from these environments than from any others. Out of the pride of the old and the vacuum of the new may come the means to make undergraduate life more exciting, intellectual discourse more meaningful, administration more human. And perhaps there will also arise a more dynamic demonstration of how excellence makes democracy more vital and its survival more assured. Then the universities may rise to the heights of the times and overcome their inspirational poverty. George Beadle, who is the president of the University of Chicago and a Nobel Prize-winning biologist, once implied, in fact he said, that the very large American university, but not his own, might be like the dinosaur, which became extinct because it grew larger and larger and then sacrificed the evolutionary flexibility it needs to meet changing conditions. Its body became too large for its brain. Professor Reisman of Harvard here has spoken of the leading American universities as directionless as far as major innovations are concerned. They have run out of foreign models to imitate. They have lost their ferment. The fact is, at least my opinion is, that they are not directionless. They have been moving in clear directions and with considerable speed. There has been no stalemate. But these directions have not been set as much by the university's vision of its destiny as by the external environment, including the federal government, the foundations, the surrounding and sometimes engulfing industry. The university has been embraced and led down the garden path by its environmental suitors. It has been so attractive and also so accommodating. Who could resist it, and why would it, in turn, want to resist? However, the really new problems of today and tomorrow may lend themselves less to solutions by external authority. They may be inherently problems for internal resolution. The university may now again need to find out whether it has a brain as well as a body. And now, in conclusion, I should like to raise two speculative questions that at least worry me, and I do not know the answers. I do, I think, know the questions. And I call this final section the cities of intellect. We have been speaking of the city of intellect as a university city with its satellite suburbs. The city of intellect may be viewed in a broader context, encompassing all the intellectual resources of a society, and the even broader perspective of the force of intellect as a central force of a society, its soul. Will it be the salvation of our society? The organized intellect is a great machine that has gained extraordinary momentum since the Greeks got it going 2,500 years ago. It turns out countless new pieces of knowledge, but with little thought for their consequences, their impact on the environment, like a new insecticide. Its attention to problems quite naturally does not always relate primarily to their importance, but often instead to the possibility of their solution. Thus the problems of rising population, and rising levels of destructive capacity move along without study commensurate with their inherent significance? Does this machine have within it the seeds of its own destruction? Or can it develop an overall rationality? Dr. Lee DeBridge, the president of Caltech, has said, "Scientists and engineers do worry about the consequences of their works, but neither they nor anyone else has discovered how to avoid or even to predict these consequences. The process cannot be stopped. The results cannot be foreseen. It remains to adapt." And here the social sciences and humanities may find their particular roles in helping to define the good as well as the true, and to add wisdom to truth. It may not be the conflict of cultures that is so crucial, but rather the rate at which each culture moves forward. Can the intellect come to handle all the problems it creates in the course of solving other problems? Can the university help solve the growing war between the future and the past? Can the span of intellectual comprehension be widened spatially and temporally? Then the second question. Intellect has also become an instrument of national purpose, a component part of what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. Our Western city of intellect finds its counterpart or counterparts in the East. In the war of the ideological worlds, a great deal depends on the use of this instrument. Knowledge is durable. It is also transferable. Knowledge costs a great deal to produce, very little to reproduce. Thus, it only pays to produce knowledge if through production it can be put into use better and faster. The major Eastern city of intellect has been a planned community. It grows only in certain directions and in certain ways. This allows concentration of effort, but it limits its growth and recognition except in restricted segments of the intellectual world. This city flourishes in science and in military might, but lags in the humanities and the social sciences. Whole areas that might be covered by a really modern city of intellect are largely unpopulated. The two cities of intellect form a potential bridge between the two societies, as well as a source of weapons. Knowledge is universal. Its creators generally prefer freedom. To the extent the Eastern city of intellect grows and makes contact with the Western, it almost inevitably changes its society. Here a certain type of society really may carry the seeds of its own destruction. It either competes and changes, or it loses some of its overall power of competition. Marx saw technology as the major force in history, but intellect creates technology. And the logic of the intellect's development may be quite different from the unraveling of the mode of production as Marx visualized it. History has seldom, if ever, proved a theorist to be so incorrect and at the same time so influential as Marx. The wave of the future may more nearly be middle-class democracy with all its freedoms, through its better use of intellect in all its many dimensions, than the dictatorship of the proletariat, which in fact is the dictatorship of a single party. However, it has not as yet been proved conclusively whether intellect can preserve and even create the culture of freedom in which it best flourishes, more effectively than technology under communist leadership can be used to bolster dictatorship. The intellect, and the university as its most happy home, can have great potential roles to play in the reconciliation of the war between the future and the past, and the solution, one way or the other, of the war between the ideological giants who now rend the world with their struggles. Certain it is, however, that the reconciliation of the future and the past can only be made more elusive in the context of an ideological struggle where survival is almost the sole essence of rational behavior. The two problems compound each other's effects. Now, at the outside of these lectures, I quoted from Cardinal Newman's idea of the university, his picture of the beautiful ivory tower of Oxford as it once was. It seems appropriate to conclude by quoting from Alfred North Whitehead, one of Harvard's most distinguished former professors. In 1960, he wrote these very prophetic words about the place of intellect. In the conditions of modern life, the rule is absolute. The race which does not value trained intelligence is doomed. Not all your heroism, not all your social charm, not all your wit, not all your victories on land and sea can move back the finger of fate. Today we maintain ourselves. Tomorrow science will have moved forward yet one more step. And there will be no appeal from the judgment which will be pronounced on the uneducated. These are the uses of the university. Thank you.
At the beginning of these three lectures, President Kerr said that he would prefer not to undertake to answer questions on the first two evenings in order that questions might deal with the total range of the issues that he was planning to raise in the three lectures as a unit. He has been planning and is now willing to answer questions from the audience. I was handed one in writing as we walked across the corridor to come onto the platform, and perhaps I can start the process by reading this question which a member of the audience handed to me, and we can take questions orally from the floor thereafter. I will need to say this, that because we are on the air, it will be necessary for either me or President Kerr himself to repeat the question so that the microphones can catch it, and this makes it even more necessary than would otherwise be the case for the questions to be of a reasonable degree of brevity and not themselves too long in the way of speeches. The question I've been handed is something like a multiple one. Is the multiversity idea a threat to individuality and the education of the whole man? Is there danger to the student who, as it is, has to struggle to retain his identity? Will it further the sciences more than the humanities? How far will substantial and extraordinary federal grants affect these trends and the freedom and independence of institutes of learning? That's broad enough to start on.
You better give me a copy so I can remember all the questions that are in it. The first question was whether or not the multiversity did away with the individuality of the student. And I think that has to be answered this way, that it depends upon the student. In the big multiversity, it is quite easy for a young student to come in and be lost, and really lost almost completely. I went to a small college, Swarthmore. I came from a farming community, and I remember how lost I felt on the campus of 500. And when you see 25,000 students marching through the gates, drawn from farms and small towns and so forth, you wonder where they can ever find themselves. I would say that, however, once the student gets over this shock of loss of identity, that in a very large university, it is possible for him to find his individuality in a way which is not possible on a smaller campus. He can find more specialized groups with which to work. There are more opportunities for him. The small campus can be a rather confining place and set more of a pattern on the individual's development, while in the huge university, with all its courses, with all its activities, with all its cultural programs, the student who has initiative can discover and develop his individuality. Let me say, regardless of that, well, I still have a great lingering affection for Swarthmore, and think that it made a historic mistake when they moved from 500 to the 501st student. That having now been involved in a university of some size, that I do think that the large university is a better environment for the student to prepare him to going into the large community, into the complex metropolitan center, finding his place there, and surviving there. We have within the University of California a rather interesting phenomenon. Our smallest campus is at Riverside. We started in 1954 with the idea that you might have a small liberal arts campus within a big university. We since then have had to enlarge it somewhat and change its purpose, but this is the interesting thing. You would expect that the students, given a chance to go to a small campus, would want to go there and would want to stay. The fact is that the campus which is growing the least rapidly within the University of California is its smallest campus. The campus which has the largest number of out transfers is not the big impersonal campus, but the smallest campus. And they transfer out to get their specialties in upper division work. They transfer out to get a richer cultural program. They transfer out to find activities which don't go on in the smaller campus. I might say, just one word additionally, that my own view is that the university or college ought to be either very large or very small, that there's not very much place in between. If you can be small enough to be a little village and everybody know each other, that's a fine thing. But if you're going to be big, you might as well be really big and have the advantages of size, the great libraries, the great cultural programs, etc. Now, on the question is whether or not the multiversity furthers the sciences more than the humanities, I think that has nothing to do with it. It's just the nature of society. Science everywhere is receiving the red carpet treatment. I think it's not based upon the multiversity at all. And then the question as to what's to happen to the freedom and independence of institutions of learning. There are some threats all the time. Anybody who's in a state university is familiar with it and has to be prepared to do battle all the time. The problems from the federal government I talked about last evening. But I think it's safe to say this, that the freedom of universities and the freedom of faculty members has not been deteriorating. There is no golden age of the past when there was this complete freedom. My own view is that the university has more freedom to do what it wants, that there's more tolerance in society for new ideas and for offbeat ideas by the institution and by the individual than in almost any previous time in American history. The tolerance has increased, and it is quite possible in this environment to maintain the independence and the integrity of our institutions of learning. It's a rather long answer, but there were several questions. And are there other questions now? If you don't mind, Dean Price, I think I might take them directly. Does anybody else have a question or a comment? Yes, over here.